get started. So glad you're all here. It's really good to see your faces. We are so excited to introduce this book to the community, Dawn Songs, a birdwatcher's field guide to the poetics of migration. It's a really stunning anthology made up of poetry, essays, prose poems, and we're going to read our pieces from the collection tonight. So we're four of the local authors in this collection. There are more of us in Colorado, but we're the ones who are here tonight. And I think I'll start by telling you a little bit about why the collection was created and then where the funds are going if you choose to purchase a book tonight. So this is an excerpt from one of the editors, Jamie Reeser. The other one is Drew Lanham. She was interviewed as to why they decided to create this collection, and here's what she had to say. We wanted to re-spark that spirit of celebration for the birds and in the human heart. To protect life, birds and other species, we need to bring ourselves back to life by falling in love with the world again. To remember our place as part of, rather than apart from, nature. Celebration is generative. What if humans got up every morning at dawn, stepped outside, and sang? Perhaps migratory birds can show us the way home. So all proceeds from book sales tonight will go to the American Bird Conservancy's Conservation and Justice Program, which will provide youth from marginalized communities greater access to bird watching and other outdoor activities. So all proceeds will go towards that. Okay, so I have the good fortune of introducing Janine M. Canty as our first reader tonight. She is a professor of transformative studies at the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco, telecommuting from Boulder, Colorado. Formerly the chair of environmental studies at Naropa University, she continues to teach at Naropa and at Pacific Graduate Institute's Ecopsychology Certificate program. A lover of nature, justice, and contemplative practice, her teaching intersects issues of social and ecological justice, ecopsychology, and the process of worldview expansion and change. Her most recent book is Returning the Self to Nature, Undoing Our Collective Narcissism and Healing Our Planet by Shambhala Publications. Welcome, Janine.
Thank you, April, and thank you everyone for coming out tonight. And I was so happy when it was suggested I go first, because I'm actually the least poetic, and I'm so excited to be included in this book with so many. I think April gave a little of context that we're all environmentalists, and we were asked to write about migratory birds and the human condition. And when one of the editors invited me two springs ago, and so last summer, I said, I'm not a poet. They said, oh, we'll just write something. And so I really took it as a kind of a challenge last summer, and I took a lot of time to just feel out what migratory bird would be coming to me. And I learned about that I'm mostly connected to a lot of more, stationary, non-migratory birds in Boulder. And the bird I chose to write about is the broad-tail hummingbird. And it was very interesting. So I spent last summer sitting with that, and then once I found my bird, spending some time, and I really talk about the female broad-tail hummingbird, who has such a different, she kind of has the short end of the stick, because the male bird's all like pretty with his colors, and he makes all the beautiful noises, and she has to like take care of the kids and migrate later. And so I was like, oh man. But when I finished writing the poem, I was sitting outside and I decided to read it out loud. And the most beautiful thing happened. A female broad-tailed hummingbird came right by me, and actually they're not very stationary, they're moving all the time, but she stayed there and listened. So I said, okay, that seems right. All right, so this is called An Unexpected Joy. I hear magic whiz by, an unexpected joy. No need to look and try and catch this. You are here. The precious cycle has gone round again. The cold gray contemplations bring new green ones, swirled with pinks, reds, and allochromatic possibilities. Fresh start, new skin, open windows. Broad-tailed hummingbird, both usher and initiator of summer. A deep whirling blur of beauty, endless movement, weightless, fast, dazzling. It is said that the hummingbird symbolizes joy. Of whose joy is unclear. The joy must belong to the beholder of such vibrancy and speed, a cacophony of metal crickets zinging with declaration. All accolades center on the male broad-tailed hummingbird. The female masked within more subtle hues and sound, relegated to later migration, tending of the nest and brood, lacking stardom. Is this the pattern? Binary gender roles? The layout quickly ruffles feathers. Injustice at the rigidity, sadness on translation. Would nature bind us so formally? Never to shine, always to serve. An emergent property. The female Jacoban hummingbird has mastered biological ornamentation. She has multiplied her powers with the ability to appear as a male. Her hunting grounds expanded, her colors brightened. They speculate the other female species may do the same. Magnificent vibrancy for utilitarian purpose, non-duality as freedom and aspiration, skillful means using radiance to serve, and cloaking once again within simplicity. The cool air rushes in, billowing the first leaves of autumn. Creation's kaleidoscope fading, the party-goers slowly depart. Goodbye, summer, you are so appreciated. Treasures immeasurable, the brightness of life. Time to close the windows and turn to the descent. Her young brood has flown off in independence. Her mate has left again. Time to find home once more. You are here, an unexpected joy. And then I'll just say just a little bit about, April mentioned my book that just came out came out last November, and if you're interested in it, you can order it online through the Trident, or other places as well, but support the Trident. And they said they're also going to carry it at some point in the store as well. And it's from Shambhala Publications, and it's called Returning the Self to Nature, Undoing Our Collective Narcissism, and Healing Our Planet. And it's a book that really takes the patterns of individual narcissism, the traits of someone who has narcissistic personality disorder, extreme narcissism, and looks at how that pattern is actually spreading in our society. And so we're seeing so many people, and our society encourages us to kind of be the stars of our stories, to constantly post our social media, to talk about ourselves, to be fierce individualists, to be like the best looking, the most successful, having the best partners and houses and wardrobes and all of that kind of stuff. So much of our population is so self-consumed that we don't have time often to care about one another, and more equally sadly, so many people don't have the bandwidth to recognize that we're in an ecological crisis and to take care of all sentient beings, especially nature. And so the book breaks that down and gets pretty transpersonal, and also gets into a lot of patterns of healing of what we could be, and probably many of us here are doing. So so returning the self to nature. So I think I probably took shorter than needed, but I did really short. Maybe I'll read a teeny bit from a teeny bit. Okay. Hello, Barb Capitan. And it's not a light book. So here I'm framing narcissism. In this cultural context, the modern individual is encouraged to author their own tale of specialness, essentially creating their own reality in which they must look the best, get the highest grades, buy the most expensive things, and have the most impressive job. The most, best, and highest are necessarily in comparison to others, causing unneeded competition against our friends, neighbors, co-workers, classmates, and family members. Our need to be better than causes us to be overly prideful, arrogant, and boasting about our accomplishments, with little awareness of how this affects others and ourselves. When we do not meet these ideal standards, we become vulnerable, defensive, depressed, and dissatisfied, damaging our already fragile egos. We perpetuate cycles of creating the persons of who we want to be, aggressively projecting this image to the world, and crashing when our expectations are not realized. It kind of gives you a taste, and let's see. And I'll read one other piece. In eco-psychology, which April mentioned, and my colleague Tina and I are very eco-psychology nerds, and it really looks at how people, particularly people of Western society, have disconnected from nature, causing a lot of psychoses within our society, and also destruction of Earth. And eco-psychology's goal is to bring ourselves back into harmony with both our inner, outer selves, and most importantly, with all of life. And there's a concept within both eco-psychology and deep ecology called the ecological self. The ecological self develops our understanding that we are connected to nature, building our recognition that we feel compassion and even love for nature. While you may not have heard of the ecological self prior to this, you probably can identify your ecological self. It is the experience you have in a place in nature that brings you peace and joy. Sitting on a beach looking out at the horizon, walking along a trail while the leaves crunch under your feet, seeing the first sprout from your garden, feeling the warmth of a fire on a very cold day, spotting a passing herd of deer, getting soaked in the first summer rainstorms, hearing bird song. The possibilities are endless. The ecological self broadens our identity to encompass nature. It sparks caring and an understanding that we are in this life together rather than separate. And I'll just read one more bit. The self with a capital S, is quite similar to the ecological self, yet it goes even further. It extends into all aspects of the seen and unseen world, from all beings on earth to all places, to our psyches, to our shared psyches, to our dream world. It reaches everywhere. Many people think of this self as mystical or a spiritual reality, but it can also be approached without those views. It is the ground of all being, a force that connects all life. Through such an all-encompassing force, though such an all-encompassing force can't be reduced to one field of study, one often finds it in the realms of metaphysics, philosophy, and consciousness studies. The famous early 20th century psychiatrist Carl Jung called the self the collective unconscious, describing a psyche shared by all phenomena. When we recognize the self, we begin to glimpse our shared life with all beings. All right. So I have the pleasure of introducing the lovely Erin Robertson. And Erin teaches outdoor nature writing classes. Her poetry has been published in the North American Review, Cold Mountain Review, Poet Lore, and elsewhere. Love that, and elsewhere. Past honors include being a guest of the U.S. Consulate in Kazakhstan, Voices of the Wilderness Artists in residency at Koyukuk National Wildlife Refuge in Alaska, Boulder County Artist in Residence at Caribou Ranch, and awards in the Michael Adams Poetry Prize and Columbine Poet Members Contest. She lives in Louisville with a remarkable husband, 2 sons, parakeet, and puppy, who teaches her about wonder every day.
My timer went to lapse immediately, so I need to fix my timer and then I'll start. Okay, now it's reset. I think I'll start out by telling you a little bit about how I got involved in this project. Last summer, I was at the Elk River Writers Workshop, and the first morning that I was there, at breakfast, I saw a woman wearing binoculars. So I went up to her and said, "Oh, were you birding?" And she said, "Yeah, and a few of us are going to meet tomorrow if you'd like to come out." So we met at like 6 a.m. and it ended up just being me, her, and she was Pam Ushuk, who publishes Cutthroat Journal, and J. Drew Lanham, who's one of these editors. So we birded together the next few days, and finally Drew said to me, "So Erin, you got any bird poems?" and told me about this project. So it was a really fun way to get involved, and my older son is a really devoted birder, and his birding companion Kieran is here today. So I actually do have a lot of bird poems because our family spends a lot of time birding. So the first poem in here is also about a broad-tailed hummingbird female, so that's a nice connection. Yeah. And the story here is that a few years ago, this hummingbird nested right in front of our house, right above the sidewalk. And our kids were in the throes of Hamilton obsession, so they named her Eliza, and we watched her really closely. But I really did not think that the nest would be successful because it was so exposed. So you'll hear the story first from Eliza's perspective, from above, and then from below, from my perspective. Nest from above, nest from below. From hummingbird height. I've been weaving webs together, re-spinning silk in small circles, packing cottonwood down into a soft, round cup for most of the morning before they came. Noisy,
boisterous, cracking the calm, the humans, two small ones, wearing caps with their own broad bills. I'd no time to watch their wrestling, zipped in and out with light loads, darting my knit nest with a needle of beak, beyond the reach of their wooden swords and endless tussle. But it couldn't be helped. My emerald sheen flashed too bright through fir branch. They knew me at once. Their faces grew holes and sucked air in. From the ground. Despite their eager pointing, I couldn't see till liftoff when her body uncoupled from tree, became bird, buzzed across blue like broken green glass. My eyes, distracted by her spark, had to search the limbs again, finally found the slumped open bowl she'd been busily turning on a flimsy branch right over sidewalk, likely a lesson in loss. Days later, we held a phone high when she was off at the feeder, found a single white egg, a Jordan almond in a jeweler's plush box, then two, long axes aligned, neat as a pin. One day, she landed on the lip, tiny feet tottering on the nest's edge, and we knew another soul had arrived. But it wasn't like we thought. Big, bruised purple bumps on translucent pink skin, no down at all, no elegance about it. It was the naked need of the just arrived, helpless and vulnerable, but still asking for love. How could this small alien thing, so fragile and awkward, survive in a world of no's? But she did, as did her twin. Two small, improbable yeses, weathering even the hardest hail. Oh, the anticipation as the oldest beat her wings in the nest, building strength, trying freedom, ready to launch into a lifetime of 1,000-mile journeys, almost weightless with hope. So thank you, Eliza, again for gracing our family with your presence. And then the other poem that I have in this anthology is witnessing another bird's life. And this is related to my residency in Alaska at Kayakuk National Wildlife Refuge. Through the Voices of the Wilderness program, artists get paired with a biologist who works for one of the agencies. And so I was with the National Wildlife, blanking. But anyway, with the refuge. And so I was living with this biologist and her family, and this bird, this Swainson's thrush, flew into the window of their living room and was alive at first, but then eventually died in front of us. So this is witnessing that life. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. To the Swainson's thrush. The hard thwack at the window was gentler than seeing your stunned form still on the ground, legs angled to sky, streaked cream breast heaving, head tilted, panting. The worst bit was you were alive. It ought to have been a fierce enough blow to let you pass without knowing or feeling the end. If only you'd gone out winging your way through birches, barely sensing the pain and finality of the end. That's what I thought of my grandfather's stroke, a pity he'd lived to learn what life could take away. We offered meager comfort, stroking your feathers, speaking in whispers, keeping your bloodied eye an unspoken secret among us. Your breaths dwindled, eyelids blinked slowly, closed longer each time. Then came the stillness of the absence of soul, something undeniable I first felt when our first dog died, from breath to no breath in the slightest flicker of time. I'm gonna stay in this realm of death for a little bit more. I promise I'll bring us out of it by the end. So July 7th was the 4th anniversary of my father's death. And I wrote this poem when I was on the plane on the way home after seeing him in the hospital in Minnesota, and that was the last time that I saw him in person. And it has a bird in it, so look for that. And I've never read it before, but I felt like this is the time to read it. And it's a lorica. So a lorica is a word for a breastplate, like a shield to defend yourself, to protect yourself. But it's also a word for a poem, like an invocation to protect someone. So this is Bill's lorica. And this is in Symposium Journal, which is another of the elsewheres. In the sparkling Northwoods blue-green, one more thing I have to tell you though, is I grew up in Erie, Pennsylvania, so there's a lot of Pennsylvania plants and animals in here, because that's the flora and fauna of my childhood. Okay. In the sparkling Northwoods blue-green, today we gather warmth of the longtime sun to make a blanket for your bones. Thick purple-brown twining grapevines to knit a secret room of shade, a closed space without fear, to lie a long body down, to let go the burden of being upright. Here in the crushed green of fiddlehead and jewelweed, trilliums silently go crimson, binding our carmine blood and this bit of wood. In the still pulpit, Jack sits, a silent preacher with nothing left to judge, only to witness you rest, welcoming hard scars that will turn to moss, your angular bones to be rounded with time. We bring the pull of purple magnetite, the charged ions counterbalance, positive, negative, canceled, reconciled, all accounts settled. We gather the echo in the steep shale walls, leaves written with pressure in time's patient book, shut now, nothing more to be illuminated. We call on the grosbeak's brilliant rose petal stained breast, his love song, his love sung, not said, his flashy plumes and shore song, a fine cover for his deep abiding shyness. We call upon the restless waves, smooth the jagged past like beach glass, ready the sunset canvas, curving to calm in a still quiet bay. Today, we weave these ragged fragments together, a last quilt of protection you hold to your chin. Then you split down the middle and turn to deer as the jester's gavel drops on the hours of needing to be more. And then this is another one of the bird poems that I sent Drew and Jamie for consideration. For 9 years, I worked as a biologist for a conservation group. And one of the things that I had to do was write standing declarations. So the conservation group would have to show that they had some vested interest in this species or place that gave them the legal right to speak for that species. So you had to have seen the species, you had to say that the species its existence was of value to you. And there are these kind of standard questions that you answer in a standing declaration. And they still ask me to do these sometimes because I had experience with these animals and plants in the field. So I wrote the standing deck that they asked me to write for white-tailed ptarmigan and Graham's penstemon, which is a flower. And then I wrote this poem to kind of deal with the heaviness of being asked to do these kinds of things. So it starts out with one of the standard questions. And the title is, Standing Declaration for the White-tailed Ptarmigan and Graham's penstemon. Do you believe in a creator who intends that humans should act as guardians of creation? My chest opens and frozen birds fall out. My lips part and fuzzy orange tongues lisp, yes, yes, yes. My hands clench and unclench in an angry motion like prayer, all signifying who have we become when we must swear in a court of law that we still believe in the righteousness of compassion before scientists can do their job. Tonight, while sleep stifles me, I'll do my own work, dreaming of penstemons and ptarmigans in a paradise devoid of people, where they're left to sing their own songs, make sun into sugar, into flight, just for the pure joy of being, not to do a single ache of good. Okay, I have two more short ones for you and then moving on. So I live in Louisville. So for all of 2022, pretty much, I wrote Marshall Fire poems. And I'm just gonna share one with you tonight because it has a bunch of birds in it. And it's called The Rain Sings Abundance. Rain falls in torrents, lightning double flashes, and my heart sings a watery song. Each drop echoes through my vessels as if I were a hollow jar, a suikinkutsu with a small hole left for accepting abundance and joy. All afternoon, birds zip in and out of our yard. Rufous hummers and goldfinches, black and white chickadees and slaty nuthatches, packing themselves with seeds before the thunder cracks. Now rain pounds ash into eskers, traces wrinkles into earth's skin, and maybe when we wake, amber haze will finally give way to blue. Okay, and then the last one is not a bird poem, but our family just went to Alaska and we had so many amazing experiences with humpback whales that I had to share a new humpback whale poem. So this is from June 28th, and we really saw this single humpback whale calf breach over and over again for an entire hour. So the title is The Humpback Calf Breaches for One Entire Hour. All the parents can relate to the mother whale. Her name is Constellation 2, we later learn. Her vigilance and patience, the exhausting art of corralling a young, energetic being in a world of murky boundaries. All the kids can relate to her vivacious calf, testing every bit of flesh against the taut sea-sky divide, flopping fluke and slapping fin against wave, curling whole body in an arced spiral up into air and then whacking self down in a white explosion of sound, every cell tingling with proprioceptive input, making the most of every instant of sun on one of the longest of days. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm so pleased to introduce Tina Ashray Fields, PhD, Professor Emerita of Ecopsychology at Naropa, and a practicing Druid. So awesome. She has taught about the psychological, cultural, and spiritual dimensions of environmental issues since 1999, including nearly 5 years living outdoors in a tent. She serves as an eco-spiritual guide, calls contra dances, and leads perfection-free community singing. Her writing includes All Sentient Beings by Tricycle, the Buddhist Review, summer 1999, and Trees in Early Irish Law and War, Respect for Other Than Human Life in Europe's History by Ecopsychology, June 2020. She lives in unincorporated Boulder County with her interspecies family and a backyard labyrinth. You are welcome to come walk.
Thank you. I feel super honored to be here and to be part of this panel with these wonderful fellow lovers of Earth. So following my panelists, I'll tell you how I came to be in this anthology. Jamie Reeser edited some books a while back. It was a series called Courting the Wild, and it was relationships with lizards, relationships with trees and plants, and more of a series. I wound up participating in 2 of those, and so she remembered that and invited me to participate in this one too, which I'm pretty grateful for. I haven't written poetry much in ages, and so it was a wonderful mandate to do so again. So I have 2 poems in here. The first one is Autumn Farewell Blessing for the Migratory Birds. Fall equinox. The leaves turn gold, and you wise birds heed the call to south. Farewell, winged beauties, how we will miss you. My heart aches upon your leaving. All I can offer are my blessings. As you journey, may you find nourishment at every stop. Plants offering rich seeds, green beds beckoning through built deserts, respite from predators, lift upon thermals, kindness from thunderclouds, a place to rest on vast dark water. May you travel in good company of kindred, flying above and below, led by stars and the memory maps of ancestors. And when the seasons have turned, when the time is right, may you rise together, bank your bodies on gentle winds, speed your way into the northerly sky, and hear our rejoicing when you return, heralding spring. You might be able to tell I'm not a big fan of winter. The second one is a series of haiku, which is, if you're unfamiliar with the format, it's syllables. 5 is the first line has 5 syllables, the second one has 7 syllables, the third line has 5 syllables. So the form directs it. And the idea is that you receive a snapshot of experience, so you remember it like that again. This one is called Haiku, Sandhill Crane Migration Stopover. Have you seen the sandhill cranes or heard them? These ancient birds come over here a couple times a year. So here it is, Sandhill Crane Migration Stopover. Ancient voices call from the highest sky. See them? Sandhill cranes are back! flocks of wanderers riding the sky on great wings, dancing joy at night. They're too vast to stay, but 1 week of their presence makes our lives magic. So like Erin, I too submitted another poem that was rejected. So I rewrote it though, and shortened it, and I really like it, so I want to share it here. My friend Jen Bamesberger, who is a science and math teacher visiting here from California, is going to read it with me. I was inspired by Paul Fleshman, who wrote a series of books called Poems for Two Voices. The one I first got is called I Am Phoenix. Anyway, if you like this kind of thing, look him up. It's brilliant stuff and so fun to read. So this one is called Flying Buzzards.
I think so.
We're the most widespread vulture in North America.
They call us turkey vultures, or buzzards, some folks say.
We're great big birds with wings spanning 6 feet.
But we weigh at most 3 pounds, despite how much we eat. Flying,
dipping,
diving,
soaring, wings, wobbling,
wobbling,
not smooth,
like hawks,
wobbling,
wavering,
wobbling,
or hovering,
wobbling,
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 wavering,
sharp eyes watching,
something, waiting,
searching. Is it moving? Coming closer. Downward.
circling,
Downward. Circling down.
Something tasty there. Landing. Buzzards landing.
Thank you, Jen. And for my lovely assistant. I didn't look at the clock. Did you look at the clock? I'll just read a couple more. So here's a poem I wrote a long time ago when I first went to graduate school in San Francisco. It's called Riding on the Muni. It does have a bird in it. And the Muni is the municipal railroad. It's like an electric bus/train combo. And when you ride on it, it shakes you like this. So that's why you'll get the rhythm of this poem. So I'm riding on the Muni. Yeah, I'm riding on the Muni. And I'm riding on the Muni. I just came here from Nevada on the edge of the Great Basin, where my very nearest neighbor is a cow 5 miles away, where your psyche reaches out, expanding, breathing out, and listens to the thoughts of birds. A hawk! Golden spirals overhead, blood mine riveted on rustling, slightest movement in the grasses. And I lurch to San Francisco, where I'm riding on the Muni, and we're packed in like anchovies, but pretend no one is touching. With my clothes wrapped tight around me, I am riding on the Muni. With my thoughts wrapped tight around me, I am riding on the Muni, and I'm riding on the Muni. And I'm riding on the Muni. And he swoops with talons twisted, each in perfect ballerina's point. Exquisite fatal symmetry, dull gleaming in the twilight. And my heart, it hears the mouse scream, and my mind shrieks bloody victory. And somehow I've got possession of my nearest neighbor's paper. Got it clutched here in my talons with a death grip on Dear Abby. I'm here, riding on the Muni, with ink tickling my taste buds and the scent still in my nostrils of fresh literary kill. Oh boy. But a furtive glance around reveals I don't know if they notice. All their eyes are hid by glasses, darkly gleaming in the fog light. as we strangers huddle lonely, cradled in each other's feathers, with our buttocks jammed together and our minds like shattered sunlight as we're riding on the Muni. I got 5 minutes. Okay, maybe a little bit. That's right. Okay, I have 5 minutes left. I'll do a couple more if that's all right. They're more about just deep connection with nature as a whole. I wrote these a while back. Really seeing a tree. So these next two are about that job that was mentioned, that I lived outside for 5 years, an average of 270 days per year with my co-faculty and students with the Audubon Expedition Institute. And this is when I first went, and the other one is when I was going. Changes person. Really seeing a tree. I traveled much in my youth and continue to today. In Cambridge, Massachusetts, near Harvard Square, between the papers and discussions, I walked outside, seeking asylum from the reeking of my mind. My brain so numb I had to consult my notes to remember my own words. The first time outside all day. A 1-block walk was all I had time for. But grace has a way of descending in strange times. I met a golden maple, glowing with evening night leaves, and I stopped, entranced. For years I stood, looking up, feeling the skin, awed, looking at the dancing lights, looking at the bark patterns and the movement, the subtle colors, and seeing, with a big seeing, falling into the beloved through my eyes. It would take me the whole day to draw the intricacies of a thumbnail-sized piece of bark in as much detail as I could. And even then, that would not begin to scratch the surface of what was there. How long for the entire trunk? Let alone include the branches, the roots, the changing leaves, the entire living body of this tree. And then there are the changes. Every day brings new differences. Oh no, I have to do the painting over again. That leaf has been nibbled. Another one is yellow today. And the third from the left is gone. Several lifetimes would be needed just to observe this one tree. And even then, skimming a thin summary of its possibilities. Amongst traveling people, strange shifts can occur in fall. I have left men because I felt bored with them, thinking I knew all there was to know. Yet now, I feel ready to settle and be contented knowing one tree and its birds who visit, its leaf changes, its singular song in the wind. Falling into 1 millimeter of bark at a time. This, for the first time, is satisfying to me. It's enough. Maybe I'm approaching middle age. The small things hold tremendous import and easy ability to renew my soul. Okay, my final poem will also be about that time. It's actually called Going to Teach at AEI, the Audubon Expedition Institute, as I was leaving my life for the unknown. Yeah. And leaving a partner too, so that's the first part. I had thought it possible with you, brother of my heart, to join and do the homey things. Tend the fire, thatch, brew, bake, brood, But not for me, these warm delights. Not for me, soft arms in the night. Like Merlin before me, the wild woods, the wide deserts, the tongues of winds, with my bedroll I will wander. In footsteps of coyotes, from my chaste caves dreaming, singing, scheming, holding my students' heads toward the moon, whispering, "Don't just look, see." Now, at the end of my 30s, I come into bare nature. Solitary dead, thick skin, with tooth and claw decolonizing minds, and ferociously loving this blue world, the only child of my heart. And now it's my great honor to introduce our final poet, April Tierney. She's a poet, activist, craftswoman, mother, and lover of stories. Her work follows threads of eco-poetics, myth, culture, and lineage. She's the author of 3 full-length collections of poetry, including her most recent book, Memory Keeper, published by Homebound Publications in 2022. April's poetry has been nominated for the Pushcart Prize and featured in Orion magazine, The Wayfarer magazine, and Real Ground Journal, among others. She's the real McCoy. She lives in the hills outside of Lyons with her husband, young daughter, mischievous dog, and wide web of kin. Please welcome April.
I have a sense that what we're doing here is the medicine to what Janine was mentioning at the beginning, the narcissism, the self-focus, the human-centered story. I really, really love decentering the human story and bringing all the other species that we share this beautiful earth with back into the center. And I can just feel that's what we're all up to. So thanks for leaning in with us. I know it's not common, it's not what we typically bring our consciousness to, but it's really important. So this first piece that I'll share has something to do with that, like decentering my own experience and bringing in another species as just as central as my story. And this is the first poem that I submitted to the collection. I was invited by Jamie Reeser. We have a mutual friend, Bill Plotkin, who passed my name along, and to my good fortune, I have 3 pieces in the collection. So this was the first one that I sent in. And I'll also say that this is a really big story, and I didn't know if I would ever write about it. I didn't know how to go about finding language for this story, and I found it through the goose. Like that was my entry point into somehow being able to portray this story that was so big for me. It's called Mother Canada Goose. During spring, Canada geese fly northward in their great V's above the Colorado Rockies. The bowed shape of prayer is all but useless to us at this time of year. We throw our heads and hearts back instead, looking up to behold them. A skein of benediction soaring across our western sky. Invariably, one loyal pair always stops to nest at the algae-covered pond in my rural neighborhood. A few years ago, I saw the mother goose scouting out that sanctified place where she would eventually create refuge for her young. She stood atop a big boulder on the hill above our house, calling out, claiming her part in the profound story unfurling before us. The day I saw her, I was 8 months pregnant, waddling along with equal parts awe and apprehension. She stood strong and proud on the very same boulder that I sat in front of 1 year prior while fasting and praying for a vision. 3 long days and nights out on the land, audaciously asking the world if I was meant to become a mother. I wrestled with this question for a long time, fearing for the mess that future generations would inherit, wondering if it was wise or kind to bring more life onto this broken and overpopulated planet. When I finally decided to go up onto the mountain, I promised my husband that I would say yes to whatever answer came faithfully through the trees, the bees, the wind, the rocks, and the rain. So on that 3rd day, when I saw the face of our future child emerge from the same boulder that this mother goose now stands upon, after flying hundreds of miles to find her nest, I knew my bones were fiercely blessed. But I also wondered, did the goose ever question if this changing world would be viable enough to support her young? Did fear or doubt ever enter her hollow-boned body, haunt her dreams, alter her patterns of flight? I do not know the answers to these questions, but I do know that she chose the pond carefully, that she found someplace quiet and kind for her 5 downy goslings to grow into robust and brave birds so that they could make their mighty journey south come winter. I know that our children grew into the world alongside one another. I know that she and I are life bearers and that without us there is no story to tell. I know that when her family eventually flew from the pond, I missed them terribly, and that my daughter will hear tales about their elegance and intelligence for as long as there is wind in my lungs. Thank you. Okay, I'll do this one next. It's called I'm in Love with the Morning Dove. I'm in love with the morning dove. Though it wasn't until recently that I learned how to properly spell this graceful and gray-brown bird's poetic name. For years, I listened to their long songs and wondered how anyone could possibly think such choral creatures only called out in the mornings, when their bounty wrapped its melody around me all throughout the day. The spelling of words baffles me. Dyslexia was not something people talked about when I was young, though there was a teacher who told me I should simply give up on writing because hopeless was the only way to categorize my inability to force letters into sequences I could not understand. And so I stopped writing. For a long while, I stopped trying to decipher the English language, to make beauty bloom from branches withered by a culture untrained in balladry. But I never gave up on the birds' songs. There was nothing to spell in their jubilation, their elegies, their lyrical display of artistry. They are the original keepers of the oral tradition. They are the storytellers, soothsayers, magic makers. I too abide by that cosmology. And now that I know this dove, whose sound turns itself like a key into the quiet hallway of my bones, is not misnamed as the administrator of mornings, but who knows morning as a pathway to divinity, who laments with the rising and falling tides of this troubled world, who grants me permission to grieve even when grieving has gone out of fashion. Now that I know, I can simply go on listening to their long songs as I always have, as I always will, as the admiring, baffled one I cannot help but be. Thank you. Okay, one more from this collection. I'll read a couple others. This one's called Purifying the Spirits. It's a prose poem, which is a new style for me that I'm trying out. Have you ever spoken with someone who lives in a college town? Have you ever listened as they describe the way the town swells in the fall when the students return? How sometimes they are disgruntled by the increased traffic, the longer lines at the bank. But mostly how their voices ring with wonder as they relate the fervor of so much vibrancy curling around every corner. The stories that all those students carry from the places they spent their summers, the newness blowing in like fresh air to purify the spirits of all who love that town and live there year round. This is how it is in my backcountry community each spring when the birds return from their long journeys south. We are never quite sure how much we missed them until we began to hear their songs rippling through the trees in the warming early mornings. How perceptibly sparse it was for so many months without them. We are not lonely per se, as there are other birds who come from the great white north to take up residence in our hills for the winter. But even still, it is that springtime fervor with all those stories the returning ones carry from distant lands, the newness blowing in like fresh air to purify our sedentary spirits, that re-enliven this place we collectively claim as home. Their names swell in our throats like the sweetest kind of nourishment, and we call them out when we see them, welcoming them back, welcoming them home. Mountain bluebird, black-headed grosbeak, blue grosbeak, broad-tailed hummingbird, bullock's oriole, western tanager, western wood pewee, violet-green swallow, chipping sparrow, Cordillean flycatcher, yellow warbler, warbling vero, plumbus vero, mourning dove, house wren, lazuli bunting. Of course there are more. There are always more. Of course these beautiful creatures bear 1,000 other names. Of course these are the names we have given them as settlers, and their bodies remember the names that were sung into the breeze by the indigenous peoples of these lands, the Cheyenne, Ute, and Arapaho, the Tististe, Nuche, and Hanone, in languages made from the trees, the roots of the trees, the stars, even the moss, and the wind, yes, always the wind. Collectively, in all the names that you bear, we welcome you back, magnificent birds with multiple homes. Welcome home. Okay, let's see. Maybe I'll do one. Yeah, this has a bird in it, but snakes too. Yay, okay. This is from my recent collection of poetry, Memory Keeper. I'll read two from this. This is called Bearing Witness. Twice now, I have watched giant snakes feasting upon other families' babies. The first one was in the woods, winding down a rough trail with a friend. We heard the birds screeching well before we spotted their devastation. Dozens of little chickadees bouncing around in the trees, crying out in maddening screams, truly as if their lives and their offsprings depended upon it. Then we saw the wide body of a snake, wrapped halfway up and around the trunk of the enormous tree, which had a hollow right at its center, as if the tree's mouth had been caught mid-scream, too. The snake's head was deep in that hollow, and as the clan of birds bounced from limb to limb in a torrent of commotion, my friend and I stood with jaws dropped to the forest floor, watching the snake slowly ingesting, then digesting, golf ball-sized clumps like a conveyor belt down her smooth, elongated body. The baby birds seemed to remain intact as they traveled through that dark tunnel into the opened arms of their death. such a chilling, unforgettable sight. A woman and man stumbled up the trail just then. The woman let out a yelp. "This is awful. We must stop it. Quick," she said to the man beside her, "throw a stick at the snake." But he just stood there, staring, surely stilled by the rare grandeur of it all. I wondered if anyone had ever yelled at her mid-lunch, "Stop, no, don't you dare take in another bite." Of course not. What respectable person would try to stop life from exquisitely living? Isn't death the only way any of us go on existing? The second encounter was halfway below the rim of the Grand Canyon. I was resting in the shade with a few friends and my shoes kicked off when a rattlesnake casually slid past the place we were sitting, directly over my hiking boots and into the dense grass. My friend jumped up onto the picnic table and I scooted back as we watched a ground squirrel barrel up to the rattler and toss sticks in his direction. Meanwhile, another squirrel started yelling at the first one from high up in the tree, pleading with his love to move back, but she would not. She kept screeching and tossing up earth, the fiercely protective mama that she was, desperately trying to defend her nest. The snake seemed unfazed by this, slowly coiling himself up and around her babies, his head tucked into the center of his lap, quietly feasting on those little furry lives. This time, I could not see the tunnel body slowly digesting in his well-contained coil, but surely felt sorrow and astonishment working its way through my own simple flesh. The squirrel in the tree kept beseeching his sweetheart on the ground to back down, while she carried on with the agony of it all. They sat there for what seemed like hours, until finally the snake slithered off, leaving no trace of the nest in his wake. The squirrels eventually stopped screaming, and the silence that echoed off the walls of the canyon will live on in me forever. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to end with this one tonight. It's a love poem to life and death. So they're both here. It's called Morning Prayers. Every day in autumn, my husband wakes before dawn, while I continue laying in our soft bed, listening to him getting dressed in the dark. His movements are monastic, all adorned in prayer and devotion. There is purpose to the way he pulls on his pants and hunting jacket, quietly, so as not to disturb his adoring wife, who has grown accustomed to waiting for the sound of the alarm, laying awake for some time, though rarely lets on. I hear the front door open, then close, and feel his sturdy body walking up the steep hill behind our house, his footsteps slowly settling back into the dreaming. Each morning he sits under the same pine tree where he remains for at least a few hours, well past sunrise and the frost's first radiant glow. He watches the deer as they greet the day, combing the stilled landscape in their small families, heads bent in gratitude over what little green grass remains. He tracks their stealth frames, learns their patterns, admires their power and grace. His rifle is always at his side, but more often than not, these curious four-legged kin come close enough to stare, perhaps even as an offering to this honorable hunter and the family he is beholden to. But more often still, my husband is held in place by their proximity and inexplicable beauty, and so he does not take the shot. A mama with her two fawns visits often, the little ones mewing at him, surely by now recognizing this equally mysterious man sitting in the morning light. When he comes in, often frozen to the bone as I am folded over a hot breakfast, he laments at not being able to lift his gun, at how much he hates the killing. The doughs remind me too much of you, he says, always with a soft flame in his eyes. He admits that all he is capable of out there is prayer. And then the morning comes when I hear the shot. It is so loud, it billows throughout my whole body. I instantly know that some gorgeous deer has died as I open my eyes to the blazing orange sun lifting his sleepy head above the horizon. So I too began to pray. Then my good man comes in to get me. Quick, get dressed, I need your help, he says. His posture is reverent, humble, grief-stricken. So I dress and follow him up the mountain, bringing local maize and sage to offer this one who has offered her life to us, and the tiny growing babe that I now carry in my womb. She is so newly dead, she appears nearly alive, laying on her side, still steaming with warmth. Her eyes are open and pink tongue hangs from her mouth, tasting the early rays that sweep out across the morning. We kneel and speak aloud our gratitude, admiration, blessings, and heartbreak, laying beauty on the ground beside her. Then together we slowly carry this great one down the mountain. I hum as we walk, holding her elegant hooves in our trembling hands. This doe, who in my husband's eyes looks so much like me, surely is part of our family. Surely will nourish our bodies and go on breathing with our storied beings. We vow to live well into her good name. Thank you. That is not an easy poem to read in Boulder with so many vegetarians. But it's a spiritual practice in my home and family, and so it's good to share it with you. And more than a practice, it's a way of life for us.